morning, good afternoon, and good evening, no matter what time zone you're in. Welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. We are so happy you're joining us today.
Seriously, we have such an amazing topic lined up for you. Hey, Sip and Talkers, grab your coffee, get comfortable, because today's Sip and Talk session is, it's a really fascinating one.
Oh, it's incredibly fascinating and, highly relevant to just understanding how the world actually works right now.
Exactly. So imagine for a second that you pack up your entire life, right? You move across the world.
Big move, lots of stress.
Huge move. You're navigating visas, finding a new place to live, getting your kids into a better school system. You are actively choosing this brand new environment.
Right.
But the very second you get there, you spend hours online every single day complaining to everyone back home about how terrible your new country is.
Yeah, complain about everything.
Oh, everything. The subways are dirty, the people are chaotic, the system is totally failing. It's this massive psychological contradiction, but it's one that millions of people literally live out every single day.
It really is.
So today we're exploring the mechanics of narrative psychology. And specifically, we're looking at how a country's education system can install this victimhood mindset so deeply into its people that it completely alters how an entire generation views reality, even when they leave that system.
Yeah, and right off the bat, I think it's crucial we set the framework for what you're going to hear today.
Yes, please do.
Because our mission with this discussion is totally objective. I mean, every single country on Earth has its national myths, right? They all have their own specific framing of history.
Oh, for sure. We definitely do it here.
Exactly. But today, we are taking an impartial international look at the mechanics of indoctrination. And we're zooming in specifically on the Chinese education system's victimhood narrative. We're looking at this through a purely sociological and psychological lens. This isn't about criticizing anyone. We just want to understand the actual machinery of how massive population-level narratives are built.
Which is so helpful for just, giving you the tools for independent critical thinking when you're trying to make sense of all the wild global news out there.
100%.
And I think that's such an important baseline because we're looking at the actual engineering of a mindset. And based on research from places like The Economist and Foreign Affairs, this engineering always starts by constructing a very specific, continuous storyline.
A storyline that, crucially, anchors itself to real history.
Yes. It doesn't start with a complete fabrication. It anchors to very real historical trauma. The system builds its foundation on things like the Opium War, the Treaty of Nanjing, and the Eight-Nation Alliance.
Right, that late 19th and early 20th century military coalition.
Exactly. Foreign powers intervening to protect their own trade interests. And the education system basically bundles all of these genuinely devastating historical events together into this core concept known as the century of humiliation.
And that anchoring to reality is what makes the psychological tactics so incredibly effective. Because, the events of that century absolutely happened.
Oh, yeah. No one is denying that.
The imperialism of that era was genuinely brutal. But the manipulation lies in the selective reinforcement.
How so?
Well, the education system takes this wildly complex period of global history, and it just strips away the internal political failings or, the nuanced economic factors of the time.
Right. It just deletes the nuance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it distills it into a singular, undeniable narrative, which is basically, we were bullied, we were the innocent victims of Western aggression.
So it creates this perfectly clean storyline of the oppressor and the oppressed.
Exactly.
But the real trick, and I think this is where the geopolitical tactics actually come into play, is that they don't leave that narrative safely in the 1800s.
No, they definitely do not.
They drag that exact same dynamic seamlessly into the 21st century. The storyline presented to a modern student dictates that the West has inherently always wanted to suppress them.
It's a permanent state of victimhood.
Right. So because of that framing, modern issues aren't viewed as just like standard international competition. When Trump initiated those trade tariffs, or when the U.S. enacted the Citoyens Act to restrict the export of advanced semiconductor technology, it wasn't framed as, a national security strategy.
Or just standard economic maneuvering.
Exactly. It's presented to the public as the exact same historical oppression, just wearing a modern suit.
Analysts actually refer to this as a monocausal narrative.
Okay, monocausal. Tell me more about that.
So it takes a wildly complex modern reality, one that involves shifting global supply chains, domestic economic policies, intellectual property disputes, all that stuff.
Super dense, complicated stuff.
Right, and it compresses all of it into one highly emotional cause. The underlying logic fed to the public is simply, they are terrified of us becoming strong, so their only goal is to crush us.
Man, I was trying to visualize what this looks like in practice, and it's like you're running a marathon, right?
Yeah, Kate, I like this.
You're sweating, you're pacing yourself, and suddenly the runner in the lane next to you gets a massive sponsorship and puts on this highly advanced pair of carbon-plated running shoes.
Oh, those are fast.
Super fast.
Yeah.
Now, in a standard competitive framework, your reaction would be to, I don't know, analyze their stride, train harder, or figure out how to engineer your own pair of advanced shoes.
Right, you adapt and compete.
Exactly. But under this monocausal victimhood narrative, instead of adjusting your run, you just stop dead on the track. And you start screaming that the other runner is deliberately suppressing your fundamental right to run.
Wow, yeah.
You interpret their technological advantage as a direct hostile attack on your very existence.
That marathon analogy perfectly captures the shift from a competitive mindset to a totally threatened mindset. And this is exactly where the specific language used by the state media becomes heavily weaponized.
How do they use the language?
Well, observations from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, they highlight a very deliberate pattern in the official media ecosystem. When discussing tech restrictions like those TPS Act semiconductor limits you mentioned, the state media actively avoids dry, bureaucratic language.
Right. They aren't talking about supply chain logistics.
Exactly. Instead, they deploy highly physical, threatening metaphors. They'll describe a trade restriction as a stranglehold, or they'll claim the West is choking the neck of the nation's development.
Okay, using a phrase like choking the neck is incredibly visceral. That moves way, way past a simple economic dispute.
Oh, completely. It bypasses the analytical prefrontal cortex entirely. When you are repeatedly told that your country is being choked, you process that information with your amygdala.
Which is the fear center of the brain.
Right. It triggers a biological fight-or-flight survival instinct. It takes a highly technical debate about, the global supply chain of silicon chips and turns it into a literal fight for oxygen.
That is wild.
And once a political narrative is successfully tied to a basic survival instinct, questioning that narrative feels like a threat to your own personal safety.
See, I'm trying to wrap my head around how this actually scales, though. It's one thing to have some dramatic news anchors saying choking the neck, but how does this mindset get locked in so tightly across an entire population of over 1 billion people?
It takes a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah, because, teenagers everywhere sleep through history class. I know I did. If it's just a matter of reading an intense textbook, I just can't see it being this universally effective. Does their actual future livelihood get tied to, memorizing this specific grievance?
That is the exact mechanism. You hit the nail on the head. Yes, it is a comprehensive, total environment immersion. But the absolute bedrock of it all is the exam-oriented education system, specifically those massive high-stakes college entrance exams.
Oh, right. The pressure on those is legendary.
Unbelievable pressure. And in this system, students aren't rewarded for analyzing multiple perspectives or debating the gray areas of international relations. The entire structure is built around providing the standard correct answer.
Let me guess what that answer is.
Yep. Whenever the prompt touches on global history or modern geopolitics, that standard correct answer invariably positions Western powers as the perpetual oppressors.
So there's absolutely no room for an essay exploring, say, the reciprocal economic factors of a trade war. You just identify how the West is trying to stop your rise, and boom, you get the points.
You get the points. And securing those points dictates your entire life trajectory. Getting the high score means getting into a top university, which dictates your career, your social standing, and honestly, your family's pride. Psychologists recognize this as a massive societal-scale reward loop. Every single time a student writes down the official stance of victimhood, they are rewarded. Good grades, teacher approval, a secure future.
So it's classical conditioning.
Exactly. Over 12 years of schooling, this repetition creates a powerful cognitive shortcut. The brain literally rewires itself to associate this specific political narrative with personal safety and success.
But wait, I have to push back on that just a little bit.
Sure, but
Does taking those tests and regurgitating those answers actually manufacture real hate? I can see it creating, compliance, right? Just playing the game. But does it instantly turn a normal teenager into someone who harbors deep, actual animosity toward the outside world?
that is a really vital distinction to make, and it's a great question. The system itself doesn't instantly churn out hateful individuals.
Okay.
What it creates is a tiered psychological response. So for the vast majority of the population, the first tier is simply a baseline of defensive mistrust.
Just a baseline.
Yeah. It installs a preset filter in the mind that basically says, be careful, the outside world is inherently self-serving and generally hostile to us.
Oh, I see. It's like a smoke detector that's been calibrated just a little too sensitively. It's always kind of humming in the background.
A sensitive smoke detector is a perfect way to look at it, because the second tier of the response happens when that smoke detector is actually triggered by a real-world event.
Like a news story.
Exactly. If there is an international news story about a diplomatic clash or Trump announcing a new tariff, it sparks an immediate emotional reactance. The internal reaction is, see? They are bullying us again. The textbooks were actually right.
So the news event just validates that preset filter.
Exactly.
Okay, so then where does the outright hostility we sometimes see online fit into all this? Because you see some really intense stuff on social media.
Right. That third tier, the outright venomous hostility, usually requires the addition of extreme digital echo chambers.
Ah, algorithms.
Exactly. This is where the internet algorithms come in to reinforce the exam system. Social media recommendation engines systematically filter out any dissenting views.
So they never see the other side?
Never. And when individuals are isolated from any counter-narratives, and they only interact with others who share that hyper-defensive posture, that's when the mistrust boils over into actual hatred.
So it's like an amplifier.
Exactly. The education system doesn't necessarily manufacture hate out of thin air, but it drastically increases the probability of hostility by making a single emotionally charged narrative the default setting of the mind.
Wow. It sets the dominoes up so perfectly that it only takes a tiny breeze from a news headline to knock them all down.
That's exactly it.
Which connects directly to that bizarre contradiction I mentioned at the start of our Sip and Talk today. Because I actually saw this play out in real life with a friend of mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They moved to California about 5 years ago. Now, you look at their social media feeds, you would honestly think they are trapped in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. It is nonstop criticism. Like, the infrastructure is crumbling, the crime is out of control, the political system is a total joke.
Let me guess, they post this every day.
Every day. So one day we were just talking, and I asked the obvious question. If it's so miserable there, are you planning on moving back home?
And what did they say?
Without missing a beat, they said, oh, definitely not. I'm getting my permanent residency because the education system here is way less stressful for my kid, and the labor laws protect my work-life balance.
Oh my goodness. It is entirely jarring to hear someone vocalize that disconnect so casually.
Right. I was trying to understand the psychology of it, because if they are actively choosing to stay to reap the structural benefits, the constant public complaining almost feels like, I don't know, a performance. Like they have to prove something to the people back home.
It is absolutely a performance. And sociologists actually categorize this phenomenon as defensive nationalism, which is driven by intense cognitive dissonance.
Okay, defensive nationalism. How does that work?
So when these citizens move abroad, they inevitably face culture shock.
Right.
They might encounter microaggressions, language barriers, or just the overwhelming stress of navigating an entirely foreign bureaucracy.
Which is super stressful for anyone.
Totally. And when that psychological stress hits, their pre-installed victimhood script, that sensitive smoke detector we just discussed, activates.
So criticizing their new home becomes like a coping mechanism?
Precisely. They criticize the foreign country loudly and publicly to protect their own self-esteem. It is a psychological tool to offset the deep internal guilt of leaving their homeland.
Oh, wow. The guilt of leaving.
Yeah. By constantly highlighting the flaws in the US or Europe, they are unconsciously signaling to themselves and to their peers back home, hey, I didn't leave because it's better here. I haven't betrayed our nation. I'm just here temporarily suffering through it to extract the resources I need.
That is fascinating. It's a total separation of the physical reality and their political identity, because physically they want the clean air, the food safety, the uncensored internet, and the labor protections.
Right.
But spiritually, they have to maintain the posture that Western systems are hypocritical and failing. You know, I came across a highly cynical phrase in our research that sums this up so perfectly. It said, patriotism is work, going abroad is life.
Oh, man. Patriotism is work, going abroad is life. That perfectly encapsulates the duality of that existence.
Doesn't it?
It really does. And what's truly fascinating is how structured and organized this animosity remains, even when people are living outside the firewall.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, observations from the New York Times and the Pew Research Center have analyzed how this works on a macro level. They mapped out what researchers call the hierarchy of animosity, or basically the hate map.
The hate map. Okay, so if the overarching narrative frames the U.S. as the ultimate modern antagonist, how do other countries fit into this map? I assume there's a specific hierarchy of who they are supposed to be angry at and why.
The mapping is incredibly rigid. So Tier 1, the foundational historical baseline of animosity, is Japan.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. Because of the undeniable atrocities of World War II, Japan occupies a permanent, visceral spot in the public consciousness. It is the original code of the victimhood narrative, and that trauma is very real and very deep.
Right, it's an inherited historical trauma.
Exactly. Then you move to Tier 2, which is the United States. In the modern geopolitical narrative, the U.S. is framed as the final boss, the hegemon.
The final boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Virtually every current economic struggle, technological bottleneck, or geopolitical friction is laid entirely at the feet of the U.S.
And what about the rest of the world? Where do countries in Europe or other Western allies land on this map?
They fall into Tier 3.
Okay.
Countries like the UK, France, Australia, or Canada. In the official narrative framework, these countries are rarely granted the agency of being main antagonists. They're viewed merely as the U.S.'s sidekicks or lackeys.
Really? They don't even get to be their own villains?
Nope. So if Canada questions a specific trade practice, the narrative fed to the public isn't, oh, Canada has an independent economic concern with us. The narrative is, the U.S. ordered Canada to bother us.
That brings us right back to the monocausal narrative. It completely strips away the complex reality of dealing with dozens of sovereign nations and reduces it to one single source of oppression.
Exactly. It's always the U.S. pulling the strings.
That is so wild. But I want to make a really vital pivot here because to truly understand this, we have to look at the full picture.
Absolutely.
We've spent a lot of time today analyzing how historical trauma is manipulated into a modern weapon, but we absolutely must acknowledge that the historical wounds themselves are not made up.
No, not at all.
The century of humiliation involved profound generational suffering. The imperialism of that era was brutal, and those scars are legitimate. The international community shouldn't just dismiss that history simply because it's being weaponized today.
I am so glad you brought that up because acknowledging the history is essential. When external observers deny or minimize that past suffering, it actually proves the victimhood narrative right in the minds of the citizens.
Right. It just validates their defensive posture.
Exactly. It plays right into the hands of the narrative.
Exactly. The tragedy isn't that they remember the history. The tragedy is that using those historical scars as a rigid ideological shield today ultimately hurts the nation itself.
It really does.
Like if you are conditioned to view every single trade negotiation or technology standard as a life or death struggle against a malicious oppressor, you completely isolate yourself. You lose the ability to compromise, to collaborate naturally, and to thrive in an interconnected global economy, all because you are constantly bracing for an attack.
That isolation is the real cost of the narrative. But, this brings us to what I think is honestly the most hopeful part of this entire analysis.
Oh, I love a hopeful pivot. Tell me.
So we have spent this discussion detailing the machinery of the mindset, the exams, the algorithms, the media metaphors. But you have to separate the artificial system from the human individual.
The system versus the person.
Right. You can program a highly restrictive operating system.
Yeah.
But human curiosity and the inherent drive for logic is the underlying physics.
Yeah.
It eventually pushes back against the constraints.
And we definitely see that pushback happening, right? Like the narrative firewall isn't actually impenetrable despite the billions of dollars spent on it.
Not at all. Incredible ground-level research from places like Human Rights Watch and Stanford University continually highlights the profound cracks in that system.
What kind of cracks?
Well, a prime example is how citizens navigate those digital echo chambers. When internet algorithms are programmed to censor specific words or concepts, citizens don't just give up.
Right, people are smart.
They are brilliant. They invent highly sophisticated, constantly evolving metaphors to bypass the AI. They use homophones, words that sound exactly like the banned political term but have a harmless dictionary meaning.
Oh, that is so clever.
It is. And they use them to discuss real issues right under the nose of the censors. It turns internet discourse into this brilliant, subversive code.
And it's not just online either. When the pressure gets too high, it spills out into the physical world, breaking that exam-oriented reward loop completely. You look at things like the white paper protests.
Yes, the white paper protests were incredible.
Citizens figured out that if the system punishes you for saying the wrong thing, They could just hold up completely blank sheets of paper. They protested the censorship without technically breaking any speech laws. The system was forced to arrest people for holding literally nothing, which just exposes the absolute absurdity of the narrative to everyone watching.
The white paper protests were an absolute masterclass in exposing the fragility of that engineered mindset. Because when a system demands that you view the world through a singular hateful lens, there is a deeply ingrained human instinct that eventually whispers, wait, why?
Exactly, why?
People inherently crave an unmanipulated reality. They crave truth and fairness over a manufactured grievance.
It's such an amazing reminder of human resilience. You can pave over the ground with a concrete narrative, but the human desire to think freely just keeps finding the cracks and pushing upward.
It really does. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to consider as we wrap up today's analysis.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've explored how this psychological machinery is installed and maintained, but no artificial system lasts forever. So what happens when the Great Firewall eventually, inevitably, comes down?
Oh, man. That transition is going to be staggering to witness.
It will be incredibly chaotic and honestly deeply painful. You are going to have multiple generations of people suddenly experiencing massive cognitive reorganization.
Just imagine waking up and realizing that the foundational stories you were taught about your country and the world were heavily curated or fundamentally incomplete.
The anger and confusion will be immense. But despite that initial pain, the flow of logic, truth, and diverse perspectives is ultimately irreversible. Once a closed system connects to the open network of reality, the old narrative simply cannot survive.
That is a powerful reality to prepare for, and I think it highlights the ultimate takeaway for you listening today. Understanding these geopolitical mechanics, the hate maps, the reward loops, the defensive nationalism, it isn't about stereotyping an entire population. It is the exact opposite.
Yes, exactly.
It's about cultivating empathy. It's about seeing the human beings who are trapped behind the engineered narratives.
But empathy really is the only logical response when you understand the mechanics of the manipulation.
Completely. When we understand how the machinery works, we stop seeing this terrifying monolith of enemies, and we start seeing individuals trying to navigate an incredibly restrictive system. When those walls eventually do fall, the rest of the world needs to be ready.
We have to be.
We need to meet them with open dialogue, with immense patience, and with an understanding of what they've been through, not with matching anger.
Knowledge should be used to build bridges, not taller walls.
Absolutely beautifully said. Well, that brings us to the end of today's Sip and Talk session. If you found this breakdown valuable and want to keep exploring the mechanics behind the headlines with us, please hit that subscribe button to the Sip and Talk podcast so you never miss an episode.
Yes, please subscribe. And before we go, we also want to give a massive shout out to an old friend of the show.
Oh, yes. You absolutely have to go check out our friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life. He just posted some visually stunning new travel vlogs that are honestly the perfect palate cleanser after a heavy geopolitical discussion like this one.
They are so good. Seriously, go give Mickey to Life a watch.
Subscribe to his channel and tell him we sent you. We will be back soon with another fascinating topic. Until then, keep questioning the narratives, keep learning, and keep looking for the nuance in the world. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.